Today's lesson is going to talk about finding reputable sources while researching. The lesson will focus mainly on online searches, but it could be applied to hard copies of sources as well. We all know that in this age of technology and the internet growing daily, the amount of information can be overwhelming. We have blogs, social network sites, online encyclopedias, databases, personal sites, and professional sites, among other things. So how can we find what is credible and what isn't? So why else is finding a credible source as opposed to any source important? There is a Latin proverb that I think we should keep in mind as we go through this lesson. It says, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. With all the photo editing programs available now and the ability for anyone to post anything they want online with little to no repercussions, this is very true now more than ever. Look at this picture which I found online. Can anyone spot why this is a good example of the Latin proverb? Obviously, the internet wasn't around when Abe Lincoln was alive, so he couldn't have possibly said this quote. This is an example of, people posting things and claiming that they're true when obviously they're not. Finally, here's another example of why we need to be careful when researching online. This is part of a script from the 17th episode of the 19th season of the show, The Simpsons. It says Bart and his father, Homer, are talking in the car. Bart says, so Dean Martin would show up at the last minute and do everything in just one take? Homer says, that's right. Bart claims, but Wikipedia said he was passionate about rehearsal. And Homer says, don't you worry about Wikipedia. We'll change it when we get home. We'll change a lot of things. So it just goes to show you that Wikipedia, although used often by people and academics alike, is written by individuals, and where they are getting better with citing their sources, it's still not the best source to start with, and we'll look at why. Now that we know why it is important to evaluate sources and not just take information on face value, let's look at how we can do this. So here are a few things to consider. Is the site on topic? Sometimes if you search a topic, it won't be as specific as you need it to be for your purposes. Perhaps you're trying to find information on how to preserve trees in Maryland. Let's put that into a search engine like Google. So we're going to search trees in Maryland. And if you notice right here, there's about 30 million results for trees in Maryland. And obviously not all of these options will be on topic for your purpose. They're not all about preserving trees in Maryland. So you kind of have to sift through and see what's appropriate for your topic. The second point that we need to keep in mind is, does it serve or support my argument or point? Especially if you are writing an argumentative or persuasive piece, you want to make sure you are finding information that supports or agrees with the points you are trying to make. If you can't find any, perhaps you need to adjust your hypothesis or your thesis, or at least find some more information that is reputable. The third thing to consider is it current? We'll look at this a little later, but unless the site host or the author of the site takes it down, the information or page will be on the internet forever. We need to be careful to use relevant and current information by checking the date on the page. The next thing to consider is that, is this site a fact-based or opinion-based site? Either of these could be helpful depending on the purpose of your research. It's just important to understand whether they're factual-based or just opinion. And the last thing is, does it consider other sources and or provide references? Does the author cite their source or back up their claims with their own evidence of reputable sources and research? Basically, don't just take their word for it. In order to help answer some of these questions, we're going to consider the following classic questions: who, what, why, when, and how. The first question to ask about a source is who, and specifically, who is the author? Is there even an author identified on the page? If so, what makes him or her an expert on the subject? Sometimes a specific person will not be identified as the author, however, and the host site or the sponsor should be easily recognizable and trustworthy. If the author is identified, are they with a reputable organization? Sometimes just the name of the person isn't enough if you don't know them. Sometimes it could be a celebrity that the host site has paid to endorse their message. And finally, can you verify the credentials or contact information? Don't be afraid to look up the author and see if there's any other information about them, or you can look for biographical information right on the site. When you're looking for the author or host organization, you may need to look back at the website's homepage or main page of the site instead of a specific page or link. So let's look at some examples to see if you can decide which of the following sites has a reputable author. So let's say student Sally Sue is trying to find a good source for her health paper on treatments for arthritis. Which of the following options would be best based on what we just talked about regarding authors and host sites? So here's option 1. It is an arthritis website, holisticonline.com. This is about Ayurveda, which is a type of arthritis, I suppose. I'm just going to scroll down. I don't see any author at the top. Here they're giving types of arthritis. I'm going to continue scrolling down. Again, I still don't see any author. At the very bottom, here we have Holistic Online is developed by ICBS, Inc. Does anybody know what that is? I don't know. Maybe we could click here and find out. It's a cyber business service. It still doesn't really tell me too much about it. So let's look at our second choice, second option. Our second option is from the Hospital for Special Surgery. If you notice, the domain name is edu. And then it has some interviews with experts here. Let's see what it says. So here we have an expert, Theodore Fields. He's an MD. Here's his credentials. Here's where he works. Brian Nestor right there on that first page. And so you can tell that this is probably a much more reputable site. Not only can I find the information, but it has biographical information right here for me, and it's also an edu site. So for me, I would think option 2 would be the best. Let's see. And it says, good choice. The source is run by a university, again in .edu domain, and the author's credentials are visible and verifiable. Option 1, on the other hand, is an alternative medicine site run by a company that most people have never even heard of, and there's very little information about the company and also about any of the authors that may have written that exact site. Okay, so just a little way to double check and see how effective your site is or how reputable. The next question we'll look at is what, and again specifically what is the site about or what is the purpose of the site. First thing to consider is the site intended for a particular audience? Sometimes information is skewed depending on who the intended audience is. Obviously, if the site is intended for a younger audience, the information and wording will differ from a more academic site. Next thing, what's the point of the site providing the information? Sometimes the sites have a specific agenda or less than honorable purpose for providing information. So let's just look at a quick example of that. Here is an article. It's called Focus, and it's about why do students get bored? And a study at a reputable university discovers why students become bored while studying for exams. And so, this site is, lending itself to be reputable. However, there may be some fine print at the bottom. And this fine print says, this study is brought to you by Excitissa. For a free sample to fight boredom, contact, this person at this place. So it's actually sponsored by a drug company who has their own agenda by trying to say, hey, people become bored. Here's a way to fight boredom. You can buy my product. It's something to be aware of. If the site deals with an issue, especially a controversial issue, are both sides presented and discussed on the website? So be sure, like the example we just saw, that any controversial issues have both sides provided and not just one agenda is being presented. And the last thing to consider under what is, does it provide general or comprehensive information? Again, both of these could be helpful depending on what you're researching and your purpose for researching. So once again, we're going to look at a couple examples. With these examples, we're looking at what the point or the purpose of each website is. So here's one. It's about saving the endangered Pacific Northwest tree octopus from extinction. And if you look down, it does look like a legitimate website. So here we have the Pacific Northwest tree octopus. There's actually pictures. It seems like there's a lot of intelligent information. Here's some facts about it, FAQs, sightings. Other people have found tree octopuses. Here's a hawk holding one. But common sense tells us that obviously octopi or octopus, here's a blue one, really, they don't live in trees, right? Where do octopi or octopuses live? In water. So we can kind of maybe guess that this is maybe a less than reputable source. So the purpose of this site is just for fun. The photos are obviously photoshopped because we know that these animals must live in water, not on in trees or on land. All right, let's look at the next one about gender genetics. This website is from a hospital, Duane Medical Center, and it's all about gender choice, or choosing the gender of your unborn child. It is very medical. It's from a reputable source, the hospital. However, we need to keep in mind that this is only one side of this issue. So if we look back here, the point perhaps is that although it may be a real source or a reputable source, they are selling a product. And cloning is still very controversial. So you may need to look at other opinions too, not just from the site. They're trying to sell their product of choosing their gender. The last one we're going to look at is dihydrogen monoxide page. And if it's all about the dangers of dihydrogen monoxide. It sounds really bad. It's got this little environmental thing here. It's a .org site. Be careful of this. It could cause cancer, all that kind of stuff. So this site, and if you think about it, if you know anything about chemistry, perhaps you've figured out that dihydrogen monoxide is H2O. It's water. And so this is just another site with an agenda behind it. And it may be a little bit of a spoof, but it's really, has an agenda. So sites like these incorporate some factual elements, but they often exist to push an opinion or make a point. And these examples illustrate why it's important to understand the intent of a website as opposed to just the information that's being presented on it.